how much smuggling are there in the world at the moment, and what can be done to prevent that from happening?
So I think the really interesting thing about this question is that we don't have a single centralized point of view or clear view as to how much chip smuggling is happening. And that is because the main way people have found out about chip smuggling to date has been through investigative journalism, not through government visibility. So we'll see reports and credible reports of uh, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of chips being smuggled in individual shipments. And so, like, just off the top of my head, I can think of three. One was for like 2,400 H100s, which is a specific type of AI chip. Another was for 4,800 AI chips, and another was for 2,000 AI chips. And each of these was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And they're the ones we know about. And so I think a big question is that we just don't yet have visibility over where chips are in the world. Like they get exported, then we don't really understand what happens afterwards. And so I think as the Trump administration thinks about, oh, okay, we want to be more proactive, we want to diffuse more of these chips around the world, there should be there's an opportunity to be much more clever about building the capacity to know where they are. And there's a few ways to go about this. One way is to like more resourcing for the relevant enforcement area of government, which is in the Bureau of Industry and Security, to actually give them boots on the ground that they can go and inspect data centers where there are purportedly large amounts of chips and ensure that those chips are indeed where they say they are. But that's quite resource intensive. Another more tech savvy approach could be to use geolocation tracking on the chips themselves. And so have like tamper proof and robust geolocation ping based verification of where chips are. And if suddenly a lot of chips are going offline in certain areas, you know, hey, that's probably somewhere we need to inspect and be more adamant at making sure that it's happening as it's supposed to. And then I think that other element is also working more closely with allies and partners in other countries on enforcement. So Malaysia and Singapore have been sort of reported hotspots for chip smuggling to China. And that's been a lot of where the investigative journalism is focused and found a lot of evidence that this is happening. Um, and to date, we've seen a little bit of a crackdown from Singapore. They've arrested three people. But in general, it doesn't seem as though these countries are always incentivized to take as much action as might be warranted to ensure that this is seen as a crime and is not happening. So I think there's a number of things that could be done differently to ensure you have greater visibility over what's actually happening and also to prevent or disincentivize more chips going to China.
Right. Yeah, I guess at the moment it's like in the interest of Singapore to be able to to be able to do this. I don't know if the smugglers pay tax though on the money they make on this, but but maybe they go more to the local restaurant and you get tax money. But but okay, but if you like put some economic sanctions on them if they don't like responsibly check for stuff like this, then I guess that equation makes much more sense to actually crack down on it, and that is in the power of the US to do. So I guess that makes sense. Uh,
Probably would push for more proactive partnerships and upskilling and like a shared approach to sort of communicating how essential it is that those things are done correctly, even raising it to the minister level of like, this needs to be part of our
yeah,
agreements,
yeah.
and sort of using the carrot before the stick comes into play.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. So interesting with this investigative journalists. Like, do they just? I've not read about this. I've just read about smuggling is happening, but I didn't like read into how the process of this journalist. So they go there and they like try to investigate the supply chain, and then they find problems, and then okay, that's interesting. But maybe not the way to do it. Maybe a government process would be more sustainable, I guess. Um,
I think it just concerns me we don't know what we don't know.
yeah,
And we're just
yeah,
relying on some bright, smart people going in and interviewing
yeah,
smugglers.
yeah,
And that probably doesn't capture all of it.
yeah, yeah. The worst case, like how the worst case scenario, because we can like track how many, and like Nvidia knows how many chips they sell to Singapore or to Malaysia. So we kind of know what the worst case is if they have smuggled 100% of it. But probably they haven't. But like, do I have some sense of like what's the worst case here?
I think those numbers, because I know there are massive data center build-outs happening in Malaysia as well. and
Okay.
Singapore. And so
Yeah.
I don't have a good estimate that wouldn't
Mm,
be misleading on
I see.
that sort of thing. But I think the one other thing I'd like to highlight is that even when smuggling happens, the export controls still matter. Like they're still creating a differential cost that makes it harder for China to get chips and slows their AI progress. So there's also the
Right.
school of thought that's like, well, if smuggling's happening, it's all too hard. Let's just give up on export controls. And I think it's really important that we don't do that because they are still having the impact even when they're imperfect.
Right. Because the
Mm.
friction of actually having to go through the smuggler, basically. Okay.